There are montage. Hello and welcome to Daily Politics on Trust TV. On this program, we discuss issues around politics, policy, and governance. I am Shafiu Suleiman. After 5 months of industrial action by the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, labor unions in the country, led by the Nigeria Labour Congress, took to the streets to protest the federal government's inability to address issues of the striking lecturers. The NLC, which had initially warned the government to reach an agreement with ASUU, fulfilled its promise of a nationwide protest. First, by taking to the streets of all cities across the Federation, and then holding a mega rally on the nation's capital on Wednesday. They expressed worry over the suspension of academic activities across tertiary institutions in the country and accused the government of not showing enough commitment towards ending the strike. Some of the key demands by the striking lecturers include funding for revitalization of public universities, payment of earned academic allowances, adoption of University Transparency Accountability Solution (UTAS), payment of promotion arrears, renegotiation of 2009 ASUU FGN agreement, addressing the inconsistencies in integrated payroll and personal information system payment (IPPIS). Let's now take an excerpt from the mega protest which held in Abuja, as compiled by Nana Muhammad.
The Unity Fonty, a popular protest spot in the capital city, is playing host to a huge crowd. It is the second day of the two-day nationwide protest declared by the NLC, the umbrella body of workers in Nigeria. Speech followed speech as leaders and Nigerians expressed deep concern with the prolonged ASUU strike, the economic situation, and prevailing security challenges in the country.
Are you going to be tired? No! Because already our children have been alienated. If you are investing in education, you are not doing anybody a favor. You are investing in the human capital for your economy.
Universities must take a universal look. We must have the best of our brains.
The message has been passed, and without missing words, the students, the union leaders, the parents, and activists say their hopes and expectations are high. After the long walk to the National Assembly, the chairman House Committee on Labour, Mohammed Widil, came out to address the protesters, a situation that did not go well with the workers. Widil, who represented the Speaker, Femi Bajabemela, promised to ensure all relevant stakeholders will be brought together as soon as possible to address the problem.
The leadership of House of Representatives said, we are partners. We are partners. You are representing the downtrodden masses. You are representing the Nigerian workers. We are also representing the people by election.
NLC President Ayuba Waba handed the lawmaker a long letter from the union leaders. But what is next for the union leaders if government fails to honor their demands?
When we have already lined up several actions, we hope we don't reach that point because of the fact that there will be some actions which we have already set out. First is the 3-day protest and then strike action, and then we can then further scale it up to perpetual actions.
Ine Obi, an activist who took the long walk to the National Assembly, expressed hope that this time around the government will listen to the yearnings of the people.
We hope they will be able to address the issue so quickly. It's not nice that you come here, you are not seeing the Senate President, you are not seeing the Deputy Senate President, you are not seeing the strong officials. With that commitment, we can only be satisfied when we see actions.
Nana Muhammad, Trust TV News. Abuja.
We have in the studio the National President of the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities, Comrade Haruna Mohammed. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here once again.
We also have Daily Trust labor correspondent, Idewu Isamotu. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Nigerians.
And finally, joining us via Zoom, we have Comrade Hadiza Ali, who is the past SANU National Women Leader and a former Vice Chairperson, NLC. Thank you for joining us also. Short break. We'll resume the conversation shortly. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us on Daily Politics. And today our talking point is the ASUU federal government face-up and the unending strike. And now let's go straight into the discussion. Comrade Haruna, 5 months and still counting, so to speak. Students at the tertiary level have been at home, Universities have been shut down as a result of this prolonged strike, which was entered by the Academic Staff Union of Universities across the country. And after a series of negotiations, series of meetings between the federal government and ASUU, there hasn't been any substantial progress, so to speak. It has to, culminate into this street protests and, of course, threats of impending strike nationwide. Why does it have to go this way?
Well, thank you very much. But I think first thing first, there is need for us to put the issue on a proper perspective. It is not only ASUU that is on strike. All the all the four university-based unions are on strike.
Right. The
ASUU, SANU, NASU, and NAT.
That's right.
And I'm surprised at the emphasis on ASUU.
Well, that's the umbrella, if you like.
Well, it's not an umbrella. It's just a segment of the university community made up of teaching staff. And they directly deal with the students.
That's right.
But
and they're also at the forefront of the negotiation.
No.
Okay.
There is, let me just give you a historical background.
Right.
The federal government of Nigeria in 2009 entered into agreement with the four university-based unions.
That's right.
As listed above, ASUU, SANU, NASU, and NAT. And that in the agreement, there is a portion that stated clearly that this agreement is to be renegotiated after every 3 years.
That's right.
And if you look between 2009 and now, it's about 13 years. And we have had no successful renegotiation. Between that period and now, about 3 committees, were formed by the government to renegotiate this same document with the 4 university-based unions.
Why renegotiation before you go further?
Renegotiation means you sit down, do an appraisal of the status of what you had agreed upon. The agreement is basically segmented into 2. Conditions of service, and then where it has to do with financials, salaries and allowances. So we are an evolving society, and the world is dynamic. Therefore, there is nothing that is static. Now, collectively bargained agreements are supposed to be looked upon with a view to seeing whether there was need to continue with the agreements, whether there was need to upscale it or downscale it. as the case may be.
So it is provided, it is basic.
Yeah, it is there in the agreement, and both government and the unions agreed on that, and they have signed.
That's right.
Now, from 2009 until 2017 or so, there was no effort by government to show semblance of trying to. And we are all Nigerians. And you know that lives of our members is at stake, from the economy to the physical environment. Now, within that period, attempts were made after some pushings by the unions. There was the the Wale Babalakin committee that started the renegotiation with the 4 university-based unions. They went as far as agreeing on some issues, but it was not conclusive before government disbanded the committee. Then there came the Munzali Jibril committee that also came and decided to only negotiate with ASUU. It didn't have the opportunity. It left out the other 3 unions. That committee's recommendation for ASUU was also rejected by this government. This gave birth to the Nimi BRICS committee. And the Nimi BRICS committee was given a timeline of 3 months to fast track and renegotiate these provisions in with the 4 university-based unions. And that committee met with all the 4 unions. But for us in the non-teaching cadre, the 3 unions, NASU, SANU, and NAT, we were only opportune to meet with that committee only 2 times in the last 7 months. And that committee had met with ASUU for up to about 8 or 9 times.
Why the exclusion now?
Well, these are some of the complaints we have been making. We have been trying to draw the attention of government and even the committee itself. But at every point we made efforts, the committee will say that you don't worry, especially issues surrounding financials, salaries and allowances. They said they didn't have the mandate of their principals, meaning the government, to discuss such financials with us. In the meantime, we have read in the media that they had already concluded agreements with ASUU to the extent of even proposing a salary review of about of a percentage.
Yeah. I think 100% or so. Yeah.
So for us, we felt that was a betrayal, and that they were probably trying to shortchange the non-teaching staff. And we felt that we should raise our voices. So in the meantime, while these things were going on, and we have had different meetings with different government organs under the umbrella of, the conciliator, who is the Minister of Labor. We have had occasions where we met and agreed on certain issues, and we had signed MOUs and MOAs, Memorandum of Understanding, Memorandums of Action, and he had been able to bring, within that period, government agencies that were interfacing with us or that had something to do directly with our plight. And some progress were made, to be fair. Some progress were made. But the major issues, the major crux was the inconsistencies in the IPPIS payment platform.
Okay.
Which also happens to be in all the unions.
Yeah, we'll talk about the disagreement over the IPPIS. But then, somewhat true, we happen to be, in the middle of all of this. Perhaps you interface with both the government and the labor unions. And based on what Comrade, Haruna has told us, this is a protracted kind of situation. It has even surpassed, or it has gone beyond a particular government. It started long ago, cut across the Jonathan administration, and so on and so forth. What do you make up with the commitment on the 2 sides of the divide, to arrive at that amicable resolution, the sincerity of purpose between these 2 parties?
Good evening, Nigerians. Like the comrade Adela said, the issues are actually enormous. You know, we journalists, we are not supposed to take side with any of the parties.
That's right.
So what we are supposed to do is that we are supposed to be in the middle while we are canvassing or while we are advocating for the masses. Our own is the masses. Even if it is not...
Those bearing the brunt.
Yes. Even we may say that we are not concerned. We are also directly involved by the actions of both parties. But before I move forward, let me say that tomorrow we will get more elaborate messages from the government side, because I would have loved if the government representative is in this studio this night analyzing or trying to bring out the issues to Nigerians.
Yeah.
But I want to assure Nigerians that this kind of message will be brought tomorrow, because the Minister of Labor and Employment, Dr. Chris Ngigi, had invited journalists for a media briefing tomorrow. We wouldn't know what we don't want to preempt what he will say tomorrow, but we know that it's not averse to resolving the issues.
The reason why I ask this question, you know, I understand, you know, over time there has been this trust deficit between the federal government and ASUU.
That's where I'm going to.
Yes, you know, there seems not to be trust. I mean, there's some level of disconnect in terms of the trust among these two parties. While ASUU is accusing the government of not, you know, showing enough commitment to address the issues. I know federal government is also looking at, accusing the labor union of prolonging, you know, the strike unnecessarily, because there were certain interventions that were made. But let me put it to Comrade Haruna. The negotiation, you know, the agreement that was entered into in 2009 was not actually involved, does not involve this current administration. But the fact that government is continuum, certainly the government has to take, you know, whatever burden that is therein. And then some say, you know, the projection, if you like, or the commitment was that enormous. We're talking about monies into trillions of naira. Some point, I think 1.5 trillion naira, you know, continuously for 3 years. 2010, 2009, 2010, 2011. Now, did the unions also put into consideration the fact that, you know, what they are asking for perhaps might not be realistic looking at the prevailing conditions?
Well, I'm happy you are a journalist, and it is expected that you should know something about everything. Well, meaning that the issues of economy of Nigeria should not be anything new to you. The problem of Nigeria, when people keep saying there's no money, I don't believe them. Because the issues surrounding this matter is issues of misplacement of priority. In this same country, we have been spending about 6 trillion naira or so in the name 3 trillion, 4 trillion in the name of subsidy over 12 calendar months. And these are monies that go into drain pipes. We don't even know who collect them. Now, how do you place this side by side with the yearnings and aspirations of the masses to have their children educated? There is no one in this country, I stand to be corrected, from the level of the 36 governors that we have and all the ministers that we have in this country, including members of House of Reps and senators that have gone to any private university for their first degrees. They all went through the public universities, and that those universities were funded by the common patrimony of Nigerians. Why now? Why are they trying to shift the goalpost? It's like you try to use a ladder and climb up, and then once you climb up, you now remove the ladder so that nobody will catch up with you. If you know, these people are so shameless that you see them celebrating the graduation of their children on the social media in foreign lands. You see that every now and then. You know, how do you juxtapose that with their claim of being our leaders? So the issue of money should not be a matter that should stop us from understanding the fact that these people are not serious and are not willing to. When I went to the university, I studied alongside children of governors, emirs, ministers, and even presidents. And now, can you tell me there is a son of one minister or one governor in any of the public universities?
Some will say so it is also with the lecturers. A number of lecturers in this country do not also believe in the system. Their children also study abroad.
If you can afford it, if you can afford it, the way things are being frustrated, you try to do that to justify your own role of being a parent. But I can tell you I have 3 of my children in the public universities today, and they are at home with me. And I'm not happy about that.
That's right.
There is no one university staff that can legitimately afford to sponsor his child to go abroad, either US or UK or Canada, to go and study with the little that he gets from in the name of salary. Okay. That is not possible.
Okay, let's look at, for instance, because you are in the system,
yes,
you should be able to know the level of rot that we're talking about in the university, in the tertiary education system. Some say it's almost irredeemable, looking at the decay in terms of infrastructure, also the declining standards in our tertiary institutions and so on. Just how is the magnitude of this rot that we're talking about that need to be fixed, over time with this humongous amount of money?
This is better imagined than said. The issue of rot in our system, especially at the universities, is something that is not palatable to speak about. When you look at the issues surrounding hostels, classrooms, laboratories, if there was nothing like TED Fund, for example, I tell you there wouldn't have been any university in Nigeria, public university, that would have been functional. And remember, TED Fund is also a struggle of the unions. It was the unions that struggled to ensure that TED Fund came on board. And that is what is now directly affecting, the lives of the institutions. But the question of rot is there, and that government has not seen education as something that they should put their energies towards solving the problems. UNESCO has a prescribed ratio of what your budget should be.
26%.
At least. And in this country, it has never been beyond 5%.
Right.
And this has been a problem. Right. And that is why you see, if somebody, like they say in Hausa, if somebody wants to give you a
look
shirt,
at the one he's
you
wearing.
look at the one he's here wearing.
That's right.
So if you go to the universities, you now see, you take interest and see what is obtainable in terms of infrastructure, in terms of facilities. You know that we are in a dire condition, and therefore, whatever humongous amount that is required, I think government should not contemplate twice in doing that.
Right. Okay. Let's have Hadiza Ali, a former SANU women leader, who is joining us via Zoom, to also get her perspective. Comrade Hadiza, if you're there, Comrade is just telling us that, looking at the commitment of our respective governments over time, especially in terms of budgetary provision and attention given to education, is, abysmally low. And then looking at also the fact that, at a moment like this, there is also need for the striking lecturers, some would say, to also consider the impact of this prolonged strike. How do we reconcile these issues? Okay, I understand. Right, okay. We're having some issues with the audio there. While that is being fixed, maybe I have to put this question to you, looking at what we're just talking about. I know, consistently the federal government has been, hammering on what they call, lack of funds or paucity of funds, which is, hindering it from fulfilling its obligations. But just like Comrade has told us, it's a matter of misplacement of priority. On the side of the lecturers, some Nigerians expect that this face-up shouldn't have gone, up to this level. We're talking about 5 months, without activities that are universities. Looking at if you quantify the impact of this strike on our education system, some would say perhaps there is need for the lecturers also, or the unions in the universities, to also have a rethink and return in the interest of, the common, the children of the common people.
Yeah. Let's start this thing from, like I said, I want Nigerians to understand that we journalists, we are not taking side with anyone.
Of course you
but
don't take
we
side.
need to set some records very straight.
Okay.
Number one, when the issues on ground are basically not only about funding.
Okay.
I don't know whether it's only not about finance.
Okay.
So some people, when the unions in universities are fighting, some people will say they are basically fighting for their salary. No. We educate Nigerians, but let's say this thing clearly. They are not fighting. The unions are basically not fighting because of their salary increment. What they have listed for Nigerians to see, one of it is that equip what we are using in the school. Like, for instance, now there was a lecturer in he has resigned now, I think so, in ABU.
Right.
There was a time he was actually doing his research. I think he was doing a PhD that time. So, and the light quickly went off and the internet was disrupted. So the man was frustrated. So if the internet is not working in our institution as expected, if there is no light to be used in the laboratories, if there is no chemical in our laboratory, if there is a lot of things like that. Also, what the unions are saying is that don't let these universities, which you also, as government officials, passed through, don't let them be
in this area,
in bad situation. Exactly, in bad situation. Do something meaningful. And also, sometimes I look at myself, I coined it in my own world, that what exactly does governance entail? Governance is just that try and amass or harness the resources of, the commonwealth, the resources of the masses, then share it for them. I don't know whether you get what I'm talking about. Like for
sharing
instance,
by intervening,
yes,
to save the education sector.
by administering it for them. So what do I mean by that is that, okay, we get taxes from companies and other things. So we have natural resources, which we are getting some things there. So harness it together as a leader of the country. Then share it for the usefulness of the masses.
Right. Comrade Haruna, he's raising a fundamental issue here. The fact that perhaps government alone cannot do it, looking at the enormity of the challenge before us, especially in the education sector. And in other climes, you'll find out that other critical stakeholders would have to come in. There could be a fund, a pool where virtually everyone contributes, including the private sector and all of that. Do you think, we're not doing enough in terms of galvanizing the needed, resources, or galvanizing the needed stakeholders to come together and salvage the situation, instead of just relying on the federal government and perhaps the states?
You see, issues about funding education requires what we call a political will. You must have a political will, the political will to take decisions, to understand the need. They say a nation cannot grow beyond the level of its education.
That's right.
Today we are in this studio discussing, me and you, it is because we were educated, or because we are educated. If we were not educated, even to communicate in this medium called English, because it's neither my mother tongue or yours, would have been difficult. You wouldn't have been able to do what you are doing as a journalist, and for me to do my work as a university administrator. Now, remember that education goes beyond the tertiary institution. The foundation,
the basic.
From primary school to secondary school, then to tertiary. You also are aware that the education sector on the primary and the secondary school, the basic education, has totally collapsed. Public primary and secondary schools have collapsed. And this is because government did not see it as a priority. This is because of misplacement of priorities by governments, different governments, probably not this government, but probably, different governments that have come and
It's
passed.
more like is it a systemic problem?
It's a systemic problem.
Right.
Now, inconsistencies about policies and programs. Now, we are seeing this, and gradually it's like cancer. It's eating up. It has finished with the primary, it has finished with the secondary, and it's now permeating into the tertiary education. You can now see that students will apply for admission into university, about 1.62 million candidates will write, and there's only space for less than 500,000 or 500,000 students that can go into public institutions. And then...
So what do we do with the deficit?
What do you do with the deficit?
That's the fundamental issue.
Now the issue is, if government is really serious, what it needs to do is to project. That is, planning is very important. Okay. Government has failed to plan for its citizens. And that is why you now see that every now and then there are issues will crop up, and then abrupt solutions will be brought. There are private sector investments in education. What I spoke about the TED fund is the education tax, what they collect from contractors, from companies and so on that execute contracts for government. Right. They could as well try to, we have GSM companies. Right. From these monies that we pay from the church, they can take out something from it. That's right. And then populate this money somewhere and then start to fund some of these things.
Yes, sorry for interjecting. Now we have to take a short break. When we return, we'll continue with the discussion. I understand you're making a very valid point. In case you're just joining us, the program is Daily Politics, and we're looking at the face-off between, the Academic Staff Union of Universities and perhaps other unions in the tertiary education sector with the federal government and the unending strike. And I've been interfacing with Comrade Haruna Mohammed, National President of SANU, and Idu Isamotu was Daily Trust Labor Correspondent. We'll take a short break. When we return, the discussion continues.
Every patriotic Nigerian should hear this. Any politician who means well for the people will never allow themselves or their supporters to engage in any violent, destructive activities. No politician who truly wants to serve the people and develop the nation will encourage his followers to destroy properties or take human lives before, during, or after the elections. The Nigerian public must watch out for these traits and isolate any politician who encourages supporters to engage in violence. No genuine politician or patriot will cause trouble and seek to destroy the very society which they aspire to lead or develop. Politicians who have the good of the people at heart will not allow themselves or their followers to engage in violence, destruction of properties, and then taking of lives. Be vigilant. By their words you shall know them. Shun violence. Stay away from politicians who want you to do so. Let's join hands to make the 2023 elections peaceful. This message is from the National Orientation Agency, NORA.
Thank you very much for staying with us on Daily Politics. And today we're looking at face-off between unions in the tertiary education sector and the federal government and the unending strike. And already, we've heard from our resource persons here some of the perspectives and why, this prolonged strike. But we'll go straight to Hadiza Ali, who is a former SANU women leader, joining us via Zoom. I understand the communication has improved now. Hadiza, let's hear from you. The question I asked earlier, we have a complex kind of situation where there is, challenges on the part of the federal government and then challenges also with regards to ASUU and other unions. And then we're also looking at the rot in our institutions. How do we, reconcile these issues to ensure that, this interruption, has brought to an end? Okay, sorry for the interruption. We're still battling with the audio issue, but then we'll get back to you, Comrade Hadiza, as soon as the communication improves. But then, from the few points she made, Comrade Haruna, she actually agrees with you that it's a matter of planning. We don't plan. And that's why we're finding it difficult to address some of these problems that have been bedeviling us. And again, she talked about, that the fact that the system is not working, as it used to be. The fact that she grew up in the system before, and now what is obtainable now is not something, to write home about. So why are we not planning? Is it that we don't prioritize education? We don't value education, which we all know is also the basis and the fundamental requirement for the development of any nation that is serious?
Well, when you talk about planning, there's what you call the short term, the medium term, and the long term.
That's right.
So it depends on what you really want to achieve. Every university that is established or institution will naturally first be a product of the law establishing it. And then all universities have three core mandates: teaching, research, and community service. Now, these three core mandates are the activities that are undertaken by these four categories of staff. Academic staff, senior administrative and technical staff, junior staff, and then the technologists who work in the laboratories. All with a view to achieving those three core mandates. Now, before you could achieve all this, you would have planned, one, from your mission established in the university, mission of the university, and the vision of that university. Every university has a mission and a vision. Whether your vision is to impart knowledge and become the best institution in Nigeria or Africa or even in the world, or that you want to specialize and be an expert in one particular area, and so on and so forth. Now, the other component of the planning, we know, which is the most important, funding. Education is not anything that you want to do managing.
That's right.
You would not establish an institution and you will expect that, look, go and do this just to manage.
Manage it.
You must make sure that you must have project, before NUC issues license to any university, before it is established, you must have shown the capacity to run this institution financially without any encumbrances, whether it is public or private. Therefore, if anybody in government is not doing his job, he would have probably overlooked the provisions of such laws. And that is what also gives rise to this kind of hiccups. Now, we will not expect that any public institution that is established by government will have issues surrounding funding, because we know that in Nigeria, the major source of funding the budget is through, one, the monies that we get from the oil sector, and then the internally generated revenue, which is shared among the tiers of government.
Yeah, the federating units.
Now, the onus is on government to know exactly where you should deploy your own resources. Now, you can see how they are modeling up these matters. For example, in the last few years, while we are complaining that the conditions of service of staff and the infrastructure in the universities are not catered for, government officials, politicians in particular, are day in, day out, canvassing, lobbying, and muzzling government to establish additional institutions. You cannot, how do you juxtapose this? Okay. You have not funded the ones that are existing. You are bringing in more. Yeah. How do you fund them?
Okay, we'll come talking about funding again. Some will say perhaps time has come for the universities to, not to rely on government. We'll talk about whether there could be an alternative source of funding by the institutions themselves. But I understand Adiza is back online. Adiza, yes, you've had just the point being made by Comrade Haruna, talking about the fact that just like you also re-emphasized earlier, our planning, we're not getting it right in terms of our planning and in terms of our funding of the tertiary institution, and that's why we are where we are today. But some will say beyond this, it also requires a lot of commitments on the part of the other side of the divide, the lecturers, or those running the tertiary institutions should also show some level of commitment in terms of managing whatever is being given. Today the universities are where they are because some will say also lack of management to some extent. How would you react to these issues?
Well, I think everything boils down one, the issue of even internally generated revenues for the universities is an issue, because the school fees are clearly charges, because government said in the federal government universities there are no fees, and so whatever fees or levies that the students tend to pay, they are specific charges, so that you have it on authority that the government will say whatever you collect from the student, you should remit 100% into the federation account. So the universities are starved of funds. Now you have to deal with even the environmental issues in the hostels so that the students will not contract disease. You have to also electricity, for example, ABU where I am, the electricity bill per month, it is on record, is nothing short of 80 million naira per month. And how do you expect the university to cope up with that line of even electricity? And you have to provide electricity when the students in particular are on campus. 247, it is required, for example. Now, if you multiply 80 million times 12 months, I'm sure you will get the calculation. Now, when it comes to overhead funding from the government, how much is Ahmadu Bello University given as a fund, as overhead per annum? I tell you on authority that you will see the envelope given to it, 240 million. Is it meant to pay only 3 months electricity? What about the water? What about other essential amenities that we needed to provide for the livelihood of the students on campus? That is one. Then two, you know, when there's no motivation, certainly what kind of output are you expected to get? What kind of output? Because the remuneration is inadequate. And then year in, year out, we keep fighting for better condition of service, yet the government is not doing anything about it. Then come to talk about keeping to faith when it comes to agreement. Take, for example, now, 2009, that's 13 years ago, we have signed an agreement which is supposed to be reviewed after 3 years. And up till now, we are not talking about full implementation, that we are even calling for renegotiation. So I believe the government in its own part lacks the utmost sincerity to fund and then to fund education as it is expected. And then now the government decided to use divide and rule in favorism amongst even whom to treat as your own prodigal child and then the loved child. You have 4 children which you gave birth to, and every one of those 4 children, whatever output you are getting is sacrosanct to the development of the education that you are.
Okay, Hadiza, I would have loved to get
you one
okay.
part,
Comrade Hadiza, if you're there,
how can there be peace in the university?
How to speak to the issues, and we are at a crossroad now with all of these challenges that we're talking about.
Really?
How do we get out of the doldrums? You know, what need to be done, X, Y, Z, you know, to address these problems head on?
Okay, thank you. I think the government knows what to do. One, I think the unity of purpose in the university is sacrosanct, because you just have to, one, bring out a condition of service that will address the issues of staffing. Two, improve the condition of learning places of the students as well. Because some of the classes, when you go there, are in a sorry condition. You cannot even sit. You don't even have a chair to sit on. That is also sacrosanct. Then 3, we are all in this fight for the betterment of the education of our children. So the government should have a listening ear as to all the grievances we have raised. They are germane, and let them not allow those who are there only for their selfish interest to continue to give it the wrong advice. They should listen to what the in-house unions are fighting. This time around, we have come together to fight a common cause, and the government should know that, yes, it will no longer be business as usual.
Thank you very much, Comrade Hadiza Ali. Now, back in the studio, Comrade Haruna, we're rounding up, you know, so many issues on the ground, you know, and that requires attention. But then, how do you think we can get out of this, you know, stalemate? Because the government seems not to be shifting grounds, you know. The issue is that there is no money to fund, you know, to fund this, you know, continuous revitalization and what have you. How do we get the? I mean, how do we get out of the woods?
Well, if I were to be in a position to advise government,
very quickly, because
I would have to tell the government to prioritize its needs and wants.
Okay.
We are talking about university education, and that demands have been made before the government, and that those demands are not anything new. Now, if it is the issue of funding, reprioritize your needs. Education should be your #1 priority. A nation that is not having its citizens educated will have to pay much more than what it needed to have spent to educate them to keep the country safe.
Thank you very much. I would have loved to get your last line, but I understand time has been spent. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your perspectives on this platform. Comrade Haruna Muhammad, National President SANU, Ido Isamotu, Daily Trust correspondent, labor correspondent, and of course, Hadiza Ali, former SANU women leader. We all appreciate your thoughts and that you shared with us. On behalf of the resource persons and of course the technical crew, my name is Shafiu Suleiman. Have a wonderful time ahead.